Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. How long shall I speak for, Ajahn? I won't do a Lumpur Supin.
It's really up to you, there's no limit.
Okay. First of all, I see there's some people outside the door. Do they want to come in and join us? I'm very glad indeed to be here at Buddha Bodhivana Monastery and to be together with Lumpur Kalyano and the Sangha here. We've known each other quite a long time, 30 years or so, ish. And the name of this monastery, many pictures I've seen and heard about for many, many years, but this is the first opportunity I've had to visit. My first full day in Australia. Arrived yesterday evening, and very glad to have this brief but significant chance to be here and to be with you all, to get a feeling for this place and to appreciate all of the great good work that's gone into creating the place, and also the fertile environment for Dhamma practice that is here. When I arrived yesterday evening, about 7:30, looking at the stars, getting out of the vehicle and looking up at the sky and looking up at the stars, I thought to myself, looking up at the stars, and so the question came to mind: well, which way is up, really? Because in England, which is almost the opposite side of the planet, not totally, but almost, that when we look up, we see different stars. When we look up here, then there's a particular patterns of stars in the heavens. So that question of which way is up came to mind, and that also reminded me of many years ago when Ajahn Kusalo was living at Amaravati, and he's a New Zealander, and had lived and practiced with Lumpur Viradhammo for many years, and he was at Amaravati and helping to lead the family events. He asked exactly that question of the children gathered for the family summer camp one day. He said, which way is up? And then saying that, and the kids also go, this way, this is up. And he said, well, I live in New Zealand, which is on the other side of the planet, and so when I point up, I'm pointing in the opposite direction. So, which way is up? The value of these kind of considerations is to really appreciate how limited our point of view is, or how conditioned, how subjective our point of view is. We tend to assume what we see, and our perspective is the truth and is reality and is reliable, dependable. But the attachment to our point of view, our literal physical point of view, like which way is up, which way is forward and backwards, where the cold winds come from the south here. Of course, in Britain, the cold winds come from the north. if the wind comes from the south, it's sort of warm and balmy and coming from Africa, and the weather is comfortable and pleasant. So the conditioning that each of us has as ordinary human beings is we are, say, conditioned or persuaded by our own particular view as being correct, being reliable, being true. But if we attach to our views, if there is what is in Buddha Dhamma called dit upadana. Ditti is views or opinions. Upadana is clinging. Then inevitably we find ourselves in a state of conflict with other beings. We directly create the causes for dukkha, for dissatisfaction in our lives. So I feel this is a very useful area to look at attachment to our views, literal physical views, and more importantly, our opinions, our beliefs, and what we take to be absolutely true and real in our perspective on the world. With respect to clinging, to attachment, then there's a very significant sutta I like to quote. Sutta number 37 in the middle-length discourses, the shorter discourse on the destruction of craving. And the Buddha makes this very emphatic statement. He says, he uses a short Pali phrase, which is Sabbe Dhamma Nalang Abhinivesaya, which translated means something like nothing whatsoever should be clung to or grasped at. Don't cling to anything. He said, and then in that sutta, he says, if you've heard this, you've heard everything. If you've understood this, you've understood everything. If you put this into practice, you've practiced everything. If you've realized the fundamental reality of this, then you've realized everything. That's a paraphrase, it's a short version, and not 100% accurate, but close enough. So that's quite an astonishing statement from the Lord Buddha. That, and as Ajahn Buddhadasa put it, he said, you can basically compress the entire Pali Canon into those 4 words. Sabbe Dhamma Nalang Abhinivesaya. Don't cling to anything. That's the brief Pali Canon. Pali Canon in brief, don't cling to anything. And so it's extraordinarily significant. If we can recognize the habit of clinging and of attachment, and we can learn to let go, then that is the direct path towards peace, towards liberation, towards the quality of freedom and ease in our lives, and thereby making our life more of a blessing to the other people, the other beings around us. So in this respect, I feel development of wise reflection and mindfulness, satipanya, mindfulness and wisdom, wise reflection, yoniso manasikara, these are extraordinarily helpful qualities. First of all, in this respect, learning to watch and listen to our own opinions. When we know I'm right, when we are attached to our particular point of view and don't even realize that, then to catch that conviction, like, but I'm right, this is true. Then to catch the mind making that kind of assertion, that having that sense of conviction about an idea or a point of view, and to stop, to question that and say, well, hang on a minute, is that so? Many years ago, when I first showed up at Wat Pa Nanachat as a layman at the beginning of 1978, so 46 years ago or so, I was thoroughly convinced that I understood everything very, very well, and I couldn't figure out why the monks and novices at Wat Pa Nanachat, the International Forest Monastery in Thailand, why they kept saying, well, that's an opinion, or that's attachment to views and opinions. Why they keep talking about opinions? What is this? This wasn't a kind of language I was used to hearing in an everyday conversation. And I kept saying, well, no, this isn't an opinion, it's a fact. And then they would say, well, it's your opinion that it's a fact. I'm like, "Argh." It would just really annoy me. These kind of monks are very pedantic and difficult. Why don't they just accept that I'm right and they're wrong? And that, yeah. And I was telling this same story a few days ago when I was in Malaysia. And what really struck me when I started to get a sense of what this Buddhist practice was about and the use of meditation and wise reflection, after about 6 weeks or 2 months at Wat Namachat, it dawned on me that something that I saw that was true then, 2 months into being at the monastery, was different from what I had seen as being true a couple of months before. So this little light went on. Well, if I'm right now, I must have been wrong then. But I was convinced I was right at that point, and what I understood was true. So what does that say about what I think is right now? Oh, maybe this too is just another opinion. This is a view. And, that's what they're talking about, attachment to views and opinions. Okay, this is serious. So it started to give a whole different perspective on the world of ideas and information, and the way that the mind holds conceptual knowledge, information, facts, and what we think we understand. And so I feel this is very helpful in our lives to establish the practices of mindfulness, wise reflection, learning to listen to our own thoughts, listen to our own judgments, and to, in a sense, not believe our own minds so easily, so readily, and to challenge that. Earlier today, when we had maybe some of you who are, a few of you I know were here earlier today, a few probably just have come for this evening, there's a very, very simple practice that Luang Por Chah would encourage with respect to the mind's judgments and opinions and views, that is a really helpful way of cultivating that quality of wise reflection and mindfulness and wisdom in relationship to our opinions, our views, our beliefs, and just to first of all to catch the flow of thought, to recognize that and to take a step back. And so when you make a judgment of well, I'm right, this is true, to take a step back and ask, well, is that so? Or when you say, this is really wrong, to take a step back and say, well, is that so? This is really beautiful, is that so? This is awful, is that so? And this is a very simple practice, very uncomplicated. And if that is applied moment by moment, day after day, it radically changes the inner landscape. It changes the way that we look at our own certainties, our own judgments, and not just how we sort of frame our picture of the world, but how we judge each other people, or how we judge ourselves. So this learning to recognize the attachment to views and opinions, tit upadana, and letting go of that is then having recognized it, training the heart to see the limitations of that, and to let that kind of simple reflection of, is that so, to have its effect and to let go. Another of the practices I mentioned earlier today, even more simple than is that so, is just to ask the question, so? And this is really helpful. Any kind of judgment. This is really unusual. This is very strange to me. So, this is really familiar territory. This is something I really understand well. So, this is exactly what I wanted to happen. So, this is exactly what I didn't want to happen. So, and it can sound like a bit of a put down or a sort of negative attitude or being dismissive, but if that kind of question is asked from an attitude of mindfulness, wisdom, loving kindness, then every time what it'll do, it will expand our sense of the mind's picture of the world, and we see that there's a broader picture, a wider reality than we've been used to, or the way we judge things. The world is a more spacious place. We find we are more adaptable, dealing with our own body, our own health, dealing with the work situation, family situations, situations in the planet, and so forth. So another kind of clinging, attachment, that Luang Por Chah's teaching points very, very directly to, and one of my favorite things to quote from his teachings, there's one of his Dhamma talks. He never gave titles for his talks. We recorded them and translated them and gave them titles. He never prepared a talk, and let alone gave a title to any of his talks. But there's one in the collected teachings called Convention and Liberation. And those of you who are Thai speakers, you probably listened to that in the original, in Luang Por's own voice, in Thai language. But it begins with the words, at least the English translation begins with the words, the things of this world are merely conventions of our own creation. Having established them, we get lost in them and give rise to all kinds of trouble and confusion. So again, that's quite an emphatic statement, quite a strong statement. The things of this world are merely conventions of our own creation. We make the world. It doesn't mean to say that the four elements are sort of conjured up magically from our own minds, but how we name things. Like 30 years ago, this wasn't Buddha Bodhiwana Monastery. This was a vineyard with a different name and a cattle farm. And before Captain Cook arrived in Australia, then I'm sure this area was known by other names and different designations, and there was different landscape in many ways that was here. So what is this place? We give it a different name. We arrange things, we organize buildings and gather and meet in different ways. And we say Buddha Bodhiwana Monastery. Or we call this area Victoria. So again, before the Brits arrived, this was not Victoria. So we designate things into existence by the way we name them, the way we use language to describe things. So this realm of attachment to conventions, the way we designate things is also extraordinarily useful and helpful to look at and to see how the mind makes judgments. Again, similar to attachment to views and opinions, the conventions are what we see as appropriate or wholesome, holy or unholy, or right or wrong according to our customs and traditions. So in the suttas, it's called silapat upadana. So attachment to conventions or rituals, it's mostly spoken about in terms of religious rituals, like bathing in the river Ganga to clear away all your bad karma, or worshipping fire as a purification, and so on and so forth. So it specifically refers to rites and rituals of a religious nature, but Luang Por Chah would expand this to sort of customs of society, the kind of clothes that we wear, what's appropriate to wear, what's right to wear, what's wrong to wear, how should we sit, how should we arrange our bodies, how should we relate to the different parts of the bodies. So he was fascinated when he first went to the West in 1977, how different customs were. I don't think he'd ever seen people shake hands before. And he's like, oh, Sumedha, what are they doing? He'd probably seen it in some of the old movies that they used to play in the villages that would come around when he was a young lad. That they would play the movies and have their own kind of locals sort of doing spontaneous commentaries or filling in the dialogue by guesswork. And so he might have seen that on one of the movie screens, but there were many customs like shaking hands or the way that people queued for things. He had to have Ajahn Sumedha explain, why are they all standing in a line at the bus stop, and that I had to explain, this is called queuing, Luang Por, and this is very important in Britain, and queue jumping is like a kind of heinous crime if you jump in this country, if you kind of dodge around everybody else and try and get on the bus first, it's just like almost the same as sort of murder or robbery. It's kind of terrible, terrible thing to do. Queue jumping is absolutely inappropriate in this country. So, and Sri Luang Por was fascinated by these things that were, very important in the West, but not so significant in Thailand, or didn't exist at all. And when he came back to Wat Pah Pong and was talking about this, he said, hey, I saw people just go along and touch each other on the head. It's like, in this country you'd never do that unless an elder person might ask a senior monk to give them a blessing and tap them on the head. But yes, an ordinary person or just tapping a friend on the head it'd be really very inappropriate, very wrong to do. But they were just kind of doing that to each other as quite an ordinary, everyday thing. And then he said, but if you think about it, there's not much difference between a head and a cabbage. And touching somebody on the head is really just like touching a cabbage. And even though it's sort of in English, and it was like many years after that evening in Wat Pah Pong, and I wasn't there when he said that, you can almost feel the intake of breath, like, a head is the same as a cabbage. You can't say that, Luang Por, you can't say that. But to him, it's like, well, it's kind of round and a bit soft on the outside and kind of hardish underneath. It's kind of like a cabbage, really. It's not that different. But and you could, by imagination, feel like the sort of tensing of how can Luang Por say that? And then, well, actually, he's kind of right. Oh, why we do make in Thailand the head is very, very sacred, and you wouldn't touch that casually unless it was a parent to a child or somebody asking a blessing for a blessing from a senior monastic. So Sila Bhat Upadana is attachment to conventions, and there's a particular sutta. It's not mentioned very often, and maybe it's more well known in the Thai Buddhist world or the Sri Lankan Buddhist world, Burmese Buddhist world. But certainly in the West, it's not referred to very often. But I feel it's very, very significant teaching. It's called the exposition of non-conflict, the Arana Vibhanga Sutta. So it's number 139 in the Majjhima Nikaya, middle-length discourses. And it talks about like the way we use language and attachment to particular terminology. And I feel that because there's so much conflict in the world now and has been in the past, and a lot of the conflict comes from the different way that we see things, the opinions, points of view, and the way we describe things, what's important to us. And the arguments between nations, between religious groups, and in society generally. So in this particular teaching, the Buddha uses this example. He said we shouldn't be attached to the terminology that we use, the local vernacular, if you understand that word, the local usage of particular words. And he said, you can take an individual article, and probably I don't think I was there when the Buddha gave this talk, but he picked up something of this nature and said, you can call this a pot, you can call it a dish, you can call it a bowl, you can call it a saucer, and he goes through this long list of about 8, 9, 10 different words, saying you can call it a pot, you can call it a dish, you can call it a saucer, you can call it a bowl, you can call it a pan. It's the same object, but in different parts of the country, they use different words for this, or different people use different terminology. It's the same thing, but you can say no, it's not a bowl, it's a dish, or it's not a spatoon, it's not a saucer. It's not a food bowl. It's not a cooking pot. And so that he said, this is how we argue with each other. We fight and conflict because we say no, it's not a saucer. It's a bowl. No, it's not a bowl. It's a dish. No, it's not a dish. It's a pot. And it's the same thing, but we're attaching to our own kind of terminology and how we see things, and because of that, then we can get excited or upset or into conflict with each other. And randomly picking up this happening to be a useful item here. So this is this rather beautiful ceramic object, I would say. I call it beautiful. So it's a spatoon. So in Thailand, then this is used for rubbish. So back in the early days of Chithurst Monastery in sort of 1979, 1980, it was life there. It was very rough and ready, as we say. All of the mugs we had kind of either didn't have handles or had chips in them. The carpet we had. There was only 4 rooms in the house that were habitable when the Sangha first moved in there, because it was filled with dry rot, and the previous family had been very, very eccentric, and the whole house has sort of been allowed to crumble around them, and the family lived in 4 rooms, and the other 18 rooms were just sort of left filled with rubbish and collected possessions and filled with dry rot as the building was sort of crumbling around them. So in the early days of life at Chithurst, it was very, very cold and damp, and we just had scraps of carpet or leftover carpet and bits of matting to cover the floors, and so it was very, very rough and ready living. But then a young man came along and who came from quite a refined background, and he wanted to be an anagarika and join the community. And so when he joined, he brought a number of very nice things with him, like a nice carpet and a nice some nice cups and such like that were very, very smart. And but also he was very fond of Asian artifacts, and one of the things that he brought along was a spatoon like this. So this was sort of the nicest piece of pottery or bowl-like thing that we had, so that we used this as something very, very like that for our incense burner on the shrine. And so, but in Thailand, many Thai people would know this is the kind of thing that you might use for relieving yourself into, keep in your bedroom at night when you don't want to go all the way out to the bathroom or the outhouse, or that you throw rubbish into at the mealtime. But it was the nicest piece of kind of shrine gear that we had, and so it was sitting up on the shrine as the incense burner. And a visiting elder monk from Thailand came one day, and he was visiting the Thai monastery in London, Buddha Padipa, and he'd heard about Chithurst Monastery opening up, came down to visit and to meet Luang Por Sumedho, came into our shrine room, knelt down in front of the shrine and froze. Like, there's this chamber pot on the shrine right in front of the Buddha. It's like, and you could feel the wheels turning, and he said, my Thai is very, very rudimentary, but he said something along the lines of, it might be better to use something else for your incense burner. Please take that chamber pot off the shrine, that this is not appropriate. But us being sort of ignorant Farangs hadn't quite sort of put that two and two together, because for us it was a really nice piece of china, beautiful blue and white ceramic. It's the smartest piece we've got, so obviously put it on the shrine and use it. It's the most sort of better than using a kind of salad bowl, something of that nature. So I wouldn't. I'm not accusing that particular monk of being attached to his point of view, but it was a very strong point of view. A very strong convention that you do not use a spatoon on the shrine. So, just checking. Just checking. I was, in case I was embarrassing myself on camera and in front of everybody, in front of Ajahn Kalyana. So, this is not a spatoon. This is a proper bona fide incense burner. So anyway, I do feel that that sutta, the discourse, the exposition of non-conflict, is really a wonderful teaching, and I feel it's so important for us to recognize the way that we use words the concepts that we have, that's not the only way of talking about things. That's not the whole story, and so that we can so easily be say, no, it's not an incense burner, it's a spatoon, you know? But in and of itself, it's just rupakanda. It's just a material object. It's just the four elements: earth, water, fire, and wind, put together in a certain form, and we designate spitoon, we designate incense burner, we designate right, wrong, beautiful, ugly, should be, shouldn't be. We add that on. So the more that we can, again, appreciate how we designate things into existence by our language, by our family conditioning, our education, the nationality we have, the cultural conditioning we have, then if we can get a bit of space around that, then when other people see things differently, rather than thinking that, oh, they're wrong, or that's a stupid tradition, and we recognize, oh, that's interesting, that person sees things very differently than the way I do. And particularly in situations in the workplace, in the family, in society, the more I feel that we can genuinely appreciate the point of view that others have, the way people language things, then it leads to that arana, the non-conflict. We find a way that we are respectful of each other, we make space for each other, we are more adaptable to situations. And I would say that that kind of adaptability is a real, it's the gateway to real freedom, real happiness, real peace in our lives. It doesn't mean that we don't respect our own point of view, we don't sort of ignore the way that we see things, but we see that's only one. That's only one point of view, that's only one set of conventions. And like Luang Por Chah reflecting to the community at Wat Pah Pong would have been sort of 1977 when he came back from just before the Rains retreat began, that just saying, yeah, what's the difference between a head and a cabbage, really? And that kind of readiness to go, oh, well, yes, yeah, it's just a material object, earth, water, fire and wind, put together in this particular configuration. We call it head, or we call it cabbage, but you know, these are just the four elements put together in a certain form, and we designate it in certain ways because of our human conditioning. And if we can really take that to heart, then it changes the landscape of our life, again, very, very radically. The kind of people that we judge, or they're not our lot, they're not Theravadan, they're Mahayanists, or they're not Buddhists, they're Christians, or they're Muslims, or they're Hindus, or they're not educated like me, or they're a city dweller, not a country dweller like me, or they're that lot across the other side of the water, across the other side of the mountain range. We judge each other, we label each other, and create separation so easily. And that kind of separation, that kind of judgment, is a cause of conflict and division. When we can really appreciate how, as Luang Por Chah put it, we designate things into existence. When we really appreciate that, then life is much more spacious. We have a lot more ease and a lot more freedom, and we are able to express our perspective, our point of view, but we're not assuming that we're right, or that's the truth, and others' point of view is inferior or wrong or somehow bad just because they're not like us, not like me. Many years ago, I don't know if Ajahn Kalyana was there at Wat Pah Nanachat at this time, and in the era when Ajahn Jayasara was the abbot. Were you there at that time? You might have been in the picture, but there's a famous photograph of when Ajahn Jayasara was the abbot at Wat Nanachat. They had a group photograph, I guess, at the end of the Rains retreat. All the sangha sitting arranged, or standing in the arranged for the group photograph. And one of the monks was quite gifted at Photoshop. And he'd taken out the faces of all the other monks and pasted Ajahn Jayasara's face on the head of all the other monks in the photograph, and then labelled it, the perfect monastery. So as long as everyone thinks like me, if everyone thought like me, then we would have perfect harmony. And so it was a kind of a joke, kind of not a joke. Maybe Tanya was there as well at that time. But it's like, yeah, if only you could think like me, everything will be fine. And when you spell it out like that, it's ridiculous. But often that's the way we relate to the people that we work with in our office, our hospital, or school, or college, or wherever we work in our monastery. Why can't they be like me? And then everything will be fine, wouldn't it? And so that's a very, very limited, very childlike and narrow view to see the world from. The other, there's in the usual list of the kinds of clinging that in the teachings that outlined by the Buddha's words, we have karmupadana, which is usually first on the list, attachment to sense pleasure, and the last is attavad upadana, attachment to views of yourself. So I won't go into enormous detail, but the karmupadana, attachment to sense pleasure, so a lot of the world and the economies around the planet, a lot of human life is based upon that attachment to sense pleasure and trying to maximize the amount of pleasant feeling, pleasant sensory experiences, what we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, what we eat, what we hear, what we feel, that the more that we sense pleasure we can experience, then generally, from a worldly perspective, we assume that then life is better. But again, what we mistake, the mistake that we make with the pursuit of sense pleasure is that there's two kinds of happiness designated in the Buddha Dhamma. Well, there's probably more, but at least two. So, sense pleasure brings about the experience of asada, which means gratification. So it is pleasure. There is a pleasure. If you're hungry, and then there's some of your favorite food available, that first mouthful of food, something goes, yes. Right? I'm not reading anybody's mind. How did he know that? Because we're all the same. If you're hungry and there's some of your favorite food is there, you take a mouthful, something goes, yes. So that is asada, is gratification. So and the Lord Buddha points out, yeah, it is pleasant. There is a happiness, there is a pleasurable feeling. That's genuine, and we feel that. But asada has its partner. It's like you get the front and the back of the hand. You don't get just the front, you get the front and the back. So asada has the partner adinava, which means the liability or the downside or the shadow, if you like, the negative side of things. So the adinava is the liability. So that if you take one mouthful and you this is delicious, this is great, then the second mouthful, slightly less inspiring, third mouthful, it's kind of ordinary, fourth mouthful, you don't even notice, and you're looking for the next thing. That'll be even more pleasant, even more delightful. And then the liability is that experience of that particular taste of that food can't remain permanently satisfying, but the mind has kind of attached to the pleasant feeling and wants to have that again, wants to have that yes feeling. So then the downside is we keep looking for that in other places. And then we keep looking for another taste, another feeling, another sound, another visual object. And so that the downside of investing in that gratification is that it feeds the cycle of craving and disappointment and ignorance, and then more craving, more disappointment, more ignorance, and on and on and on we go. That's what we call the bhava chakra, the cycle of rebirth. And so there is gratification, there is happiness in sense pleasure. It is pleasurable. Karma is pleasant, but the downside is that we get habituated to that, and we keep looking for the sensory experience that will be permanently and completely, fully satisfying, and we keep being disappointed. As Luang Por Chah put it, if we look for satisfaction in that which can't satisfy, we have to be disappointed. It's a very painfully simple logic. And so if we build our life, if there's kama upadana, attachment to sense pleasure, and we keep, say, investing in that gratification, what we're doing is we're investing in disappointment. You know, it's not. I wouldn't say that's a negative or a sour, nihilistic perspective on life. It's just that's how nature works. Years ago, I did a degree in physiology, and it's one of the reasons why great faith in Buddha Dharma arose was because having studied how the nervous system and sensory processes work in the human body and the human mind, is when I heard this teaching about craving and attachment and rebirth, I thought, well, yeah, that's exactly how it works. That any sensory experience that we have, the mind adapts to it. So something that is exciting or delightful, pleasant, just the physiology of how the mind processes that experience it becomes ordinary, it becomes boring. Whatever the sensory experience might be, the system adapts, so that we can't remain thrilled or excited or pleased by the same sensory experience. It becomes ordinary, becomes boring, becomes average. That's how the system adjusts itself, so that something that is say, it has the impact of being really delicious or a beautiful sound, like, oh, that's so nice. Yeah, but if you keep hearing it, over and over and over again, it doesn't. You don't get the oh, that's lovely feeling. It becomes really boring and then really irritating. The system continually adapts. We can't remain permanently pleased. So that sabbe sankhara dukkha, all conditioned things are unsatisfactory. So that the other kind of happiness is, rather than that gratification through sense pleasure, is sukha, S-U-K-H-A, sukha. That kind of happiness that comes from the well-trained heart, the well-trained mind, when there is, say, wholesome conduct, or there is the mind is concentrated and focused on a wholesome object, or a neutral object like the breathing. When the mind is focused, when the mind is say free of regret, and the natural result of say concentration, focusing the mind on a wholesome or neutral object, or as a natural result of living virtuously, then sukha, contentment, happiness is what arises, and that kind of happiness is of a whole different order than the happiness that's based on sense pleasure. It's in a way the happiness of the heart, free of freeing itself of defilements, freeing itself of obstructions, freeing itself of entanglement with things that are obstructive and unhelpful. So sukha, that quality of happiness, it's not completely independent, but it leads towards a much more profound and complete quality of happiness. As those spiritual qualities are developed, then that sense, that the strength and the continuity of sukha, of that contentment, becomes more and more complete. And so that leads to a happiness that is free of circumstance, so that even if your body is uncomfortable, even if you're in a difficult situation, or you can be having a lot of physical pain, or you can be in a very difficult situation, but your heart can be completely at ease. There can be a quality of great contentment, great easefulness is a good word. That the mind isn't looking for anything to be different in order to get to be happy. So that quality of sukha, of profound happiness, it's the more that the mind frees itself of greed, hatred, and delusion, the more that becomes an abiding presence, and so that the word sugato, one of the characteristics of the Buddha, is the fortunate one, is also representing that quality of easefulness, contentment, and happiness, and that quality of the heart, not looking for alternatives, the heart fully at ease with the present reality in a warm and accepting way. The last kind of upadana, of clinging, grasping, attavad upadana, is like the Vada is in Theravada, the way of the elders. Attavada is the way of me. So it's like clinging to the idea of ourself, the self-image, our perceptions of ourself, your name, your story, your qualifications, all the different aspects of the I, me, my feeling. You can say that's all sort of gathered under the attavad upadana, but particularly just the attachment to your personality, your name, your story, your living situation. That I would say that's what this kind of clinging is associated with. Whether you're full of praise, you're proud of yourself, you're pleased with your achievements and who you are and your place in the world, or you're critical of yourself. You know, I haven't really made much of my life. I'm a kind of useless person. I've wasted my life. Or that we feel that we're completely average. I'm an utterly ordinary person, not wonderful, not terrible. I'm totally average. So the self-image that we believe in, the way we judge ourselves, and the stories we tell ourselves about who and what we are, I would say that's all in the attavad upadana. And so that the practices of insight meditation, vipassana, the reflections on not self in particular, they're all aimed at challenging those habits of self-view, sakmaya ditthi, and say, well, that's a judgment that you're a success, or judgment that you're useless, or judgment that you're completely average. These are all conceits. These are all ways that the mind labels a particular set of conditions, and doesn't have to be believed in. So the many and various aspects of insight meditation that we can apply to looking at these habits of clinging to the I, me, and mine feelings, and it's going to vary from one being to another. What is most dominant, or what is strongest in those feelings of self and the self-image that's present. So that I feel it's, as I often say to people, it's each of us is very different. So it's good to explore and see where do those feelings of I and me and mine, where do they cluster, where do they gather? Sometimes it can be that you are very attached to your body and your health. You're obsessed with your health conditions, or it could be that you're that's not so important to you, but you're really attached to your possessions, you know, where you live and the things that you wear, or the things that you have, or the car you drive, or how impressed people are with the things you've got. Or maybe you're completely indifferent to your possessions, but you're very fond of your qualifications, how many degrees you've got, where you studied, and that how many academic papers you've published, or how many books you've written, and so on. Or maybe you're very self-critical, and your mind dwells upon all the things that you've done wrong. You don't notice any of your achievements or your possessions because your mind is focused on the terrible things that you've said, how you've been unkind, you've been selfish and cruel and a horrible person, and so again, I'm not reading anybody's mind, but this is, I feel it's important for us to look, use the meditation to explore, well, where does the mind get stuck? What are the stories I say about this person, this life? And where do I feel inflated or proud, or I want to let people know, sort of casually drop into conversation, who you met, or your time you spent with the Queen of England, or where you casually mentioning how many of your children go to prestigious universities, and that just sort of drop that into conversation. And say, oh look, I really like to keep letting people know that I've got one daughter at Harvard, one at Oxford, and the other one at Cambridge, and why does that keep coming up in conversation? And then noticing that, or you might feel that you're actually from a very famous family, a prestigious family, you're born with a title, and you don't want anyone to know that you're, and so you kind of. You just let them know, I'm Susan, or I'm Savitri, and you don't say that. Well, actually, you're that your dad's the Prime Minister, or that you're the Duchess of Argyll or something. That you are shy about your social situation. You want to hide that away, and just to notice, oh, that's interesting. Why do I want to keep that secret, or I don't want to be. I don't want that to be known. So all the different areas of our life that we're proud of our occupation, embarrassed about our occupation, or the various and many areas to look and see, where do we get stuck? What do we keep hiding away, or making sure that people know about? What is that? Where's that coming from? And to notice that, to catch that, to highlight that, and say, oh, let's look at that. This is all part of the Attavad Upadana, the story I like to tell about myself, or the story I keep telling about myself, even though part of me doesn't like it or feels bad about it, but I keep going to that terrible thing I did when I was a child, or that terrible when I got fired from that job because I let everybody down and lost that huge amount of money for the company. That was 35 years ago, but I can't. I can't drop that, or how you got kicked out of, expelled from school, or that you betrayed a friend. It might have been 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, and the mind goes to, oh, that was a horrible thing. It was really unforgivable that I did, or that you were the other end of the scale. You were the head of school. You were the head girl or the head boy. You got the prize. You were the valedictorian, or got a scholarship to such and such a place. Whatever it might be, that it can be all sorts of areas of our life that the mind focuses on, whether it's an illness that you have, an achievement, a crime, a disaster, a relationship, embarrassed about your unruly brother who is been sent to jail again. In my own family, I have a lot of my family in Belgium. I'm about a quarter or so Belgian, or nearly half Belgian. So my Belgian family, there's a lot of things that we don't talk about. On ne dit que ça, I think was the French expression. We don't talk about that. And various members of the family that we don't talk about, or how a particular divorce happened, on the dit. We don't speak. But quietly put away. Well, why don't we speak about that? What did happen there? What about Uncle Felix? And that bringing attention to where does the mind get stuck? Who are we proud of that we're connected to? Who are we embarrassed we're connected to? That those many and various areas. So when we talk about insight into not self, it can seem quite refined. But the selfings, they happen around what we own, who we're connected to, the stories we tell about ourselves, They can be about our knowledge, what we feel we understand, and what we are sort of what we know about. They can also be we can have a strong sense of self about how ignorant we are, what we don't know, or how inferior our mind is. We can. In Buddhist psychology, conceit doesn't mean being inflated. It means just creating a sense of I or me or mine around whether it's something, whether you're actually, it's an inferior quality or medium quality or a superior quality. It's still a conceit. Any I am is a conceit. Or I am awful, even if it's accurate. If you think I am an awful person, you are an awful person. That's a conceit. If you think you're an awful person and you're actually average or superior, all those are conceits. So I strongly encourage this use of mindfulness and wisdom, wise reflection, to catch the flow of thoughts, the way we talk about ourselves, the way we judge ourselves, what's the kind of sticking points in our life, and get interested. Look at that. Why does that have why do I react when I think of that part of my life, or why am I so proud of that, or why is that so important? What's the big deal with this aspect or that aspect? And when there is that kind of wise reflection, it's not just ruminating and thinking, kind of going over and over and just reiterating our problems or obsessions. It's a curiosity to recognize the pattern of how these things work. Well, where does that come from? How does this work? Why does my mind do that? Where's that coming from? Why am I so afraid of that? Why am I so excited about that? Why do I feel embarrassment about that? Where's that coming from? So it's a contemplation. So it's not just thinking a lot about those areas, but looking with a kind of measured, clear sense of investigation, using our capacity to explore, to say unpack the conditions of this life. And so then, primarily the point, again, I think I was saying earlier today, how the main purpose of contemplation is to shift from a self-centered perspective to a Dhamma-centered perspective. Rather than seeing this life in terms of I and me and mine and taking it personally, that the view has shifted. So we see this life and its conditioning, its habits, its achievements, its crises, its problems, its health or sickness, in terms of nature rather than in terms of me and mine. So the very succinct way that Luang Por Sumedho puts that is that the title of his most recent book, which was "Don't Take Your Life Personally." So I feel that the rest of the pages of the book could be blank. If you just take the title, just take the title on its own and really take that to heart. Don't take your life personally. If we could really do that, again, the landscape of this life would be radically different. So if we learn how not to take this life personally, and not just is our life more peaceful and spacious, but I would say the experience is that we learn to function harmoniously with others much more effectively. The choices we make, the work we do, the advice we give others, the capacity to harmonize with life situations gets much clearer and stronger. We are able to live more effectively, more beneficially, if things are seen in terms of nature, in terms of Dhamma, rather than in terms of self-view. So I think I've spoken for long enough this evening, and I offer these thoughts for consideration.